The concept of shadow work, as it's been put forth by the late psychiatrist Carl Jung, has been a huge contribution to psychological exploration. However, the knowledge of the shadow self and the importance of integrating the shadow self in with our conscious awareness has been at the core of shamanic practices since the dawn of civilization. Shadow work has been a huge part of my own healing journey, and it's a huge component to what I offer clients within my own healing practice. This video is an introduction to what's going to become a mini series of videos that I'm creating to support all of you in doing your own shadow work, specifically through shamanic shadow work practices. So please stay tuned for the entire episode. Okay guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Carrie. I'm with HolisticPsychic.com in Sedona, Arizona. And today's video, we're gonna talk about shamanic shadow work, what it means, how to do it. But before we get into that, let's start by talking about what the shadow self is. So in a nutshell, the shadow self is an aspect of our unconscious or our subconscious that is created based on aspects of ourselves that we unconsciously reject, deny, and disown. But how does this happen? It happens in a few different ways. The primary way, or the original way, the first way that it happens in our life is in our earliest formative years as we are undergoing a very natural process of socialization, conditioning, and domestication, which isn't all bad. There are components to socialization that are helpful to our development. But sometimes what happens is, as a part of that process, we are told that parts of ourselves are unacceptable, whether it be our behavior or whatnot. And so as we are feeling rejected, or we are fearing rejection, especially in our earliest formative years when we are dependent upon the people in our environment who are caring for us and raising us, as a means and effort really that's connected to basic survival instincts. If we are recognizing that there are parts of ourselves that others around us are conveying to us in some way, shape, or form that are unacceptable or disallowed or wrong or bad, we will begin to self-reject. We reject, deny, disown, push away, disconnect from parts of ourselves that we think are unacceptable by others in our environment. One of the most important dynamics of shadow work to be aware of in the shadow self is that these things, these aspects of ourselves that we reject, deny, disown, push away, don't want to admit that we have, typically actually contain components of our largest soul gifts, talents, and abilities. For example, let's say that you were born a person who's naturally super artistic and creative, but you were born into a family that favors science and logic. So if your family member begins to encourage you in the direction of science and logic and discourage you in the direction of your creativity, then your creative skills will inevitably become a part of your shadow side. So the value in doing shadow work is that you are reclaiming those gifts. You're reclaiming the light that you were born into the world to contribute to humanity. So many people think of the word shadow or shadow self as being parts of ourselves that are undesirable because other people project that onto us as our shadow self is being formed. But whether it's actually undesirable parts of ourselves or not is in the eye of the beholder. It's not necessarily factual truth. For example, I am a very creative person. I was always doing artwork. Art was one of the things that I excelled in growing up in school. I would forfeit my study halls and take extra art classes. I was always the art teacher's pet. And I did pursue my artistic endeavors in the ways that I felt permitted to while growing up. But the rejection of that aspect of myself that I sensed from people in my environment growing up is a part of what caused my largest wounds. And so it's through shadow work that I've been able to completely reclaim my creative side. I've had a long career as a professional dancer and dance teacher, which is another part of my creativity that was also not supported growing up. Luckily, I was rebellious and did it anyway, but not without woundedness. You know, the importance of shadow work is that we're reclaiming the largest parts of who we really are as beings of light. Conditioning, socialization, traumas are the primary things that begin to develop and create our unconscious shadow side. Traumatic experiences that can contribute to our shadow self can range from forms of rejection, illnesses, accidents. There's all kinds of trauma that we can experience that can end up becoming a part of our shadow side. And the shadow side reveals itself to us in our adult life or begins to act out in ways that manifest as fears, phobias, self-sabotaging behaviors and patterns. So this is why, as you can see, shadow work is a hugely helpful component to our journeys in healing, emotional healing, psychological healing, mental healing, physical healing, all of the above. There's an interesting thing about this that I want to bring up. So the shadow self that is created within us is largely based on our perception of the aspects of ourselves that are acceptable or not. So basically, the more rejected you feel in your early formative years, the more you're gonna self-reject. And so this is particularly important for people who are empathic to know, because empathic people have a tendency to sense and pick up on subtleties more than people who are less empathic do. So empathic people have a tendency to feel the feeling of disapproval or rejection more so than a person who's not tapped in or sensitive to or affected by subtle energy. So empathic people have a tendency actually to have the biggest shadow sides because you were more impacted than maybe an average person was in those early formative years. Also, when it comes to experiencing trauma, if it's things that are connected to emotional trauma, then again, that might have more of an impact on our shadow side than a person who is not tapped in on those empathic levels. So be aware of that. Here's the cool thing though. For as large as your shadow is, there is the equal opposite light to be reclaimed through shadow work. So let's go ahead and get into just exploring some introductory components to specifically shamanic shadow work. So there's a lot of information out there about shadow work as it's used in psychology, but oddly enough, not a lot of information out there around how it's used in shamanic healing practices, which is weird because shadow work actually comes from shamanic healing practices originally. Shamanic healing practices are used or worked with as a form of power retrieval and soul retrieval. So when we're implementing shamanic shadow work, we're basically involving ourselves with reclaiming our power, reclaiming our maybe what has become fragmented aspects of our soul. And so when we do shadow work, we are essentially on a journey of moving through the untruths about the aspects of ourselves that we thought or were told were unlovable or unacceptable. We're moving through those things using a variety of shamanic practices, which I'll talk about in a minute, so that we can journey back to the core of our own authentic nature, our light, our joy, our inspiration, our creativity, our playfulness, our upliftment in life. This is what is to be reclaimed through the process of shadow work. Shadow work teaches us or brings us into a journey of reconnecting with self-worth, self-love, self-appreciation in regard to our authentic soul nature without the need for external validation, which is super empowering. Now, at the end of this video, I'm going to give all of you your first homework assignment that you can begin doing to begin accessing your shadow side, so that as I'm uploading additional videos in this series, you're already going to be dialed in and connected and having a sense of what's going on with your shadow work, so that you're going to be really ready and primed for some of these exercises I'm going to be guiding you through. But for now, I'm going to just touch upon some of the principles or the modalities of shamanic shadow work that we are going to be working with. So shamanic practices for shadow work can encompass various modalities of breath work. We're going to be working with Ho'oponopono, which is an ancient Polynesian shamanic practice for healing. You'll learn more about that when I do that video. Power retrieval, soul retrieval through recapitulation and other forms of shamanic journeying. Inner child work, dream work, working with the tarot for revealing healing that can happen through your own shadow. Journaling exercises, artwork, and dance. These are just some of the things that I'm going to be covering in this mini series, and I'm super excited to be sharing these with you all because shamanic shadow work has been such a huge part of my own life. What I'm going to invite you all to do for now, to begin just accessing your shadow self, your shadow side. In shamanism, this would be considered stalking your shadow or hunting your shadow. In yogic terms, this might be considered like a mindfulness practice. Even yoga is an ancient shamanic practice. More on that in future videos. So for now, begin hunting or stalking your shadow side by becoming aware of what triggers are happening for you in your life right now. The whole reason I decided to do this mini series on shadow work is because we are in times now, based on what's happening astrologically and what's happening in the world at the time of me recording this video with the pandemic that's happening, we are in times where our shadow sides are coming up. And the parts of our shadow sides that are coming up so that they can be healed and integrated. So for now, step one, notice the triggers that are coming up for you. Notice whatever's happening in your life that is triggering you into anything other than a space of harmonious peace and balance. Whatever is bubbling up that's causing some form of discord in your internal psyche, so to speak, worry, fear, anxiety, that whole spectrum of things, be aware of what's being triggered, because our triggers show us where we have unintegrated parts of our shadow self that are still needing to be brought into healing. Also, begin paying attention to whatever's going on in your life that's bothering you. If there's any situation in your life right now that is upsetting to you, worrisome, bothering you, take some time to really let yourself drop into the feeling of that. What does it feel like in your body? So the shadow self speaks to us largely in the form of feelings. This can be emotions, it can be body sensations. Be aware of the feeling quality that is connected with the things in your life that are upsetting you or bothering you. Be aware of the feeling quality that's connected to things that are being triggered in your life right now. And you can begin by just jotting these things down, taking some type of record or notation of what your awarenesses are, so that as we are beginning our journey with the shamanic shadow work, you're going to be primed and have an idea of the things that are coming up for you to begin your journey in healing the shadow self. So stay tuned for future videos on this subject. I'm going to be uploading at least one a week, if not two, so that we can really make some headway on this journey together with shamanic shadow work. So start there. Blessings. Namaste. I'll see you in the next video.